Well, hello. It is now 6 o'clock on Wednesday evening, and it's time for Tales and Cocktails. And once again, finally and at last, I am coming to you live. My dears, it's been a bit of a siege, not huge, but a bit of a one. But tonight, I have a lovely piece to read to you. It's an essay called, or I'll call it an essay, called Midnight on the Desert by excuse me, let me get this together, by J.B. Priestley. That's John Boynton Priestley. He was born September 13, 1894, died August 14, 1984, at the age of 89. And he was a prolific writer. One of his pieces for the theater, An Inspector Calls, is still being done, steadily being done, and it's quite wonderful. Anyway, this is from a book he wrote entitled Midnight on the Desert. And so this excerpt is from chapter 1 of that book. Midnight on the Desert by J.B. Priestley. Let me begin with what I can remember quite clearly. It was at the end of my stay on the ranch in Arizona last winter. We were not leaving America yet, but we were leaving this ranch very soon, and I had things to do. There was the usual accumulated litter of letters and odd papers to be gone through, and most of it destroyed. But that was not all. I had decided during the evening to burn certain chapters, many thousands of words, of the book I had been writing. I felt I must do this at once, for I am not a resolute man and do not trust myself. But I wish I knew which I really am, the one who distrusts or the one who is distrusted. There's the problem. Yes, thousands and thousands of words would have to go along with the rubbish. Good words, all arranged to make sound sense, and with a cash value in the market, and representing something too, something more than money. Precious time, priceless time, of which they say only so much is allotted to each of us. I dare not wait for morning. Midnight was the hour for such a deed. I left the patio where we were housed for the little hut that was my working place. I remember a particularly fine glitter of stars with no moon, and with the desert hills so much starless indigo at the base of the sky. A freight train was clanking down the valley. It gave that long, dissonant, mournful cry of American trains, that sound which seems to light up for a second the immense distances and loneliness of that country. I had to do some lighting up myself with a torch in order to pick my way past prickly pear and hoya and catclaw and other hooking and spiny growths, vindictive by day and devilish by night, so late at night. The hut was in a little thicket. The sand between the curled dead leaves glittered in the light of my torch, and that would be the specks of fool's gold with which all these dry riverbeds and their banks are gilded. It looks much prettier than real gold. Someday, perhaps, it will be worth quite as much as real gold. An enormous silence had followed the train, an ironical silence, like that which comes at the end of some noisy epic. They kept early hours at the ranch, except when there was a dance at El Recreo, and there was nobody stirring anywhere, and not a sound, even from the coyotes. In the silence, slowly picking my way, I thought about this Arizona country. The New World. It seemed to me the oldest country I have ever seen, the real antique land, first cousin to the moon, brown, bony, sapless, like an old man's hand. We called it new because it was not thick with history, not a museum and guidebook place. Man had been here such a little time that his arrival had not yet been acknowledged. He was still some season's trifling accident, like a sudden abundance of coyotes or cottontails. The giant swatter cactus, standing like a sentinel on every knoll, was not on the lookout for us, had not heard of us yet, still waited for trampling dinosaurs. There was no history here because history is too recent. This country is geology by day and astronomy by night. It offers a broad view of what is happening generally in the solar system with no particular reference to man. But it has a magnificent routine. The early mornings in winter are cold, very fresh and pure. Then, under the burning noons, the red cardinals and the bluebirds flash among the cottonwoods, as if nature had turned outrageously symbolic. The afternoons are simply so much sunlight and aromatic air. But at sunset, the land throws up pink summits and sawtooth ridges of amethyst, and there are miracles of fire in the sky. Night uncovers 2 million more stars than you have ever seen before, and the planets are not points, but globes. As I reached the door of my hut and switched off my torch, I looked up and noticed yet once again, with a shrinking sense of unfamiliarity, how all the constellations had been monstrously misplaced. I was far from home. I was not homesick. That is not bad. That is bad, but there is an easy cure for it. If you have the freedom, the money, the passport, you go back to your own place and all is well. But I was beginning to feel homeless, not homesick. I had spent all the summer and the winter in America, and not as a lonely traveler whose home life was going on somewhere else, but mostly with my family. Thus, I seemed to have detached myself from England. This was quite involuntary. It just happened. The island no longer appeared to be the center of the universe. Those newspapers that came to me regularly from England now seemed to me as full of quaint fussies and snobberies as they must do to an American reader. Yet I had not had time to throw out any roots in America. Its life, so nervous and strident, so strange a mixture of kindness and cruelty, was still unfamiliar. I was not part of the scene there. Nothing that happened really came home to me. I was deeply interested, but it was all none of my business. I read their newspapers every morning, and they were black with crises. But none of their news was my news. I was temporarily a man without a country and a background. Not much harm in that. Perhaps if the whole lot of us suddenly found ourselves without countries and backgrounds, there might be much good. But the sensation was new to me, and I felt curiously withdrawn into a dreamy emptiness. Perhaps it made for egotism. We shall see. The 2 naked electric bulbs in my hut sharply illuminated its tiny interior. My no more than 12 feet by 10 of unpainted boards, with many a knothole in them, now velvety with night. There were the rough shelves with their litter of books, tins of tobacco, pipes, and letters I had never answered. The 2 small tables, one for my typewriter, the other for odds and ends. The straight little chair, too small in the seat, I used when typing, and the armchair, with its little square of red and black Indian rug and the two other Indian rugs on the floor, the woven waste paper basket, the box of firewood, and the small tin stove, only waiting for a match to be thrown in to shake and roar and be red hot. Yes, and waiting for anything else I might give it, such as a folder or two of typescript. Seeing everything in there so clearly, all these familiar things of my working day, I felt apologetic. I had come to destroy, not to create, though such destruction might be a better kind of creation. This hut was a witness to the admirable spirit of Western America, and perhaps of all these states. When I had first stayed on the ranch the winter before, I had found it hard to work in my bedroom in the patio, where people were always moving ahead and calling to one another. What I needed was a little place of my own to work in, well away from the main ranch buildings. So as soon as I came back for a longer stay, up went this shack, and within a day or two it had its bookshelves, stove, and electric light. Nothing very wonderful about all this. It was easily erected, and of course I paid for it. But I feel that in any European country, there would have been endless palavers and fusses, whole crops of difficulties raised, before one would have had a brand new place to work in. If indeed one would have persisted in the face of a mountain of objections. Here in the far west, it was done so casually and quickly. "You bet," they cried and went ahead. Perhaps it is sheer space that makes the difference. What seems obvious and easy in the vast crystalline spaces of Arizona may well appear a tricky enterprise in shuttered Europe. This shack was built on the very edge of a river I had never yet seen, the Hassayampa, which only appears as a sudden yellow flood toward the end of summer. If you drink its waters, they say, you are forever afterward incapable of telling the truth. But the winter visitor does not even see them. This had been a good place to work in. I asked for nothing better. Sometimes in the mornings, before the sun commanded the scene, it had been rather cold and cheerless, and often later in the mornings and during the blazing afternoons, it had been too warm, for there was only one layer of thin boards between me and the weather. But it had been my own place, and quiet, except for an occasional bird that would come to the window, knock with its beak, and stare at me as if we were meeting in Eden. The little hut had served me well. I had spent most of my time in there, writing a novel about London. With the door and the two windows wide open, a thin curtain drawn to dull the bright shaft of sunlight, wearing nothing but a shirt, old flannel trousers, and slippers, I would sit in a sweet cloud of American tobacco smoke, peer through it at my script, and tap away at my account of life in the rain and fog of London streets. There in the middle of my hut, with Arizona glittering around it for hundreds of miles, was a tiny, dark London into which I popped every morning about 10. When people tell you how lucky you are to be a professional writer, they enumerate advantages that you know very well are things not worth having. But they never mention this genuine bit of luck, that you can sit in Arizona and build for yourself a London that has just the people, streets, houses, and weather you need, and can then, months afterward, sit in Highgate on a dark, wet Monday morning and conjure for yourself the bright, illimitable spaces of the Arizona desert. True, other people can do this, but they must do it on their own time, for their own amusement. They are not at liberty to call it work. And it is a dark, wet Monday morning this morning, and I am sitting in Highgate, working. And that is Midnight on the Desert by J.B. Priestley. Oh, I love it. I hope you did too. Enjoy, my dears. I will see you again next Wednesday at 6 o'clock for Tales and Cocktails. Thank you for being with me. Bye now.